Today I'll be looking at powerful insights from clients in their 80s reflecting on their retirement journeys. Over my years working with these successful retirees, I've collected impactful lessons about what they wish they had known decades earlier when they first retired. That's exactly why I'm making this video today, to share these hard-earned lessons with you that could transform your retirement planning journey. So let's get right into it. Over my years working with retirees, I've probably had conversations, probably thousands of conversations, sitting across from clients and people who are looking to retire, as well as during my time teaching college courses to retirees and soon-to-be retirees. And it's pretty interesting from all that experience. You hear a lot of consistent themes, and the theme that I want to talk about with you today is what I think is the most common regret or lesson that retirees learn often not until much later in retirement. And so I'm going to go through that with you today. And my hope is that as I go through these concepts, that it might impact you, even just a couple percent, just a little bit, to improve your retirement planning and hopefully retirement experience that you have, and just improve your overall life in retirement. So I'll get right into some of these ideas. I'll start out with some research to kind of back up what I've just seen, like I said, through my own experience, which is through the Retirement Research Center at Boston College. They do research about different aspects of people in retirement, a lot of financial and psychological stuff. And one of the things that they found is that on average, retiree spending actually declines by about 1.5% per year on average. Obviously, there's always outliers, and there's always, everyone's always the exception, right? But on average, spending declines over time for retirees. And that is quite interesting because for people who are being very proactive about saving for retirement, they're often thinking about, making sure they have enough money and income. And often, I think responsibly so, are thinking about the impact of inflation and wanting to make sure that they have money that's going to be growing over time. They're going to have income sources that grow over time to provide financial security and well-being and, the type of lifestyle they like to have in retirement. So that's quite interesting because on average, spending actually goes down over time, at least according to the Research Retirement Center at Boston College. In addition to that, there's some research from JP Morgan, and one of the interesting things about looking at research from a bank on spending is that they have access to the actual banking account information of millions of people and can do some pretty interesting research on that. So I want to jump into that and look at what they found as well, and then talk about maybe some practical ways that with this insight and information, what are some changes or things that you could do earlier in your retirement to, maybe improve your overall retirement experience and have less regrets when you're older. So I'm going to pull up a chart here and let's take a look at what they found through that research. All right, so on the screen in front of us, what we're looking at is a chart showing the spending of the average retiree over time. And really, what I really want to highlight here is that for retirees, their peak spending is usually in the early years of retirement. And this chart we're actually looking at, this is for households with an average retirement portfolio between $250,000 and $750,000. That being said, the chart looks basically the same, or I should say the slope of this chart is essentially identical for different groups. So whether they did it in two other groups, so retirees with a retirement nest egg between 1 and 3 million, as well as between 3 and 5 million. So it really holds consistent across the different kind of wealth groups, if you will. So as you can see from the chart, what we have here is at the bottom we are looking at the age of the retiree, going across from age 60 up to 95. And then all these different colors just represent different categories of spending. And this is something that was highlighted in the research, and actually a recent study by David Blanchett and Michael Fink. And in that research, they found the different spending categories, how they change over time. But in generally, the slope is consistent, which is that it's going down. 1.5% per year is pretty significant as well. That compounding over time, the effect of that results in a pretty large reduction in spending from the beginning until the end of life. So you can see that early in retirement, spending is at its peak, and then it goes down and down and down. Many of the categories that go down, usually things like entertainment, travel, clothing. Everybody probably knows somebody in their neighborhood. When I was a kid, I'd go to church and I see older guys wearing suits, from like the 70s and 80s. They never updated their wardrobe. So anyway, if you'd like to update your wardrobe, please feel free to do so. But typically, retirees, that you just don't, right? You don't wear your stuff out, and spending goes down over time. And because health constraints, as you get older, you don't, maybe you're not as excited to go, sit on an airplane for 7 hours to go somewhere. So spending just happens to go down over time. I mentioned the study by David Blanchett and Michael Fink about retiree spending, and they actually came up with some pretty interesting findings in their recent study about retiree spending. So in addition to seeing that spending typically lowers over time, they also found that there's a difference in how you spend based on your income source. So when somebody has sources of income from Social Security and from pensions or annuities, for example, they tend to spend a higher percentage of that income. When you compare that with retirees who have a greater amount of their overall net worth and retirement income coming from sources like from their retirement portfolio, you find that retirees are more hesitant to spend that savings, as they kind of refer to it, and they end up spending less than what you would say they could reasonably afford to spend. And so with all this being said, sitting in conversations with retirees, what I found is that when folks are later on in life, there's often a lot of regret about, man, I wish we had taken that trip that we put off. Or, they're getting later to life and they go, man, you know what, I really could have, helped my daughter or my son with maybe a down payment on a house, or helping, some family member financially or something that they've put off or that they didn't do because they were afraid to spend. And so I guess from my perspective, this gets at just sharing some of my own insights of what I think are some of the reasons why retirees are hesitant to spend early in retirement, and then maybe what can be done about it. So in my experience, even when somebody has, significant wealth or, significant savings that they can easily meet all of their spending needs, there's always that fear in the back of their mind about, well, what if? The big what ifs will just drive you crazy. What if everything falls apart? Or what if, I have some major medical expense that comes up? And those what ifs, keep someone from consistently underspending. Another concern is that, the kind of from the medical perspective. So, what if I need to be in an assisted living? What if I need assisted living? And, how am I going to afford that? And so, again, even with significant savings, someone will underspend what they could out of fear of something that could happen in the future. And I think that's reasonable, preparing for and thinking about the future and planning for contingencies that might happen. Okay, that seems pretty reasonable to me for somebody to do. But obviously, this can be taken kind of to an extreme where, right, you're just accumulating. And, just because of your lifestyle, your spending keeps going down. And so your wealth just keeps going up and up and up and up and up. Okay, so maybe some ways of dealing with this. In a previous video that I made about creating a license to spend, which is a term that I did not come up with, although I really like it, that came from that recent study by David Blanchett and Michael Fink. I think it's really important to have some type of spending plan, some type of spending system that you set up early in retirement or before you retire, so that you have a way of measuring how much you can reasonably spend, and you have a framework to know when you can reasonably increase or spend more than you had originally planned, or when you might need to take an adjustment down in your spending to keep yourself financially strong in retirement. So what I like to do is use a guardrail system. I've got lots of videos where I talk about that, but having a guardrail system where you've essentially identified how much you can spend from your portfolio, and knowing when you can make adjustments upward or downward can provide you a framework to say, you know what, I can responsibly spend this extra $20,000 this year, or I can go on this extra trip or do this thing and not feel like you're being irresponsible or, jeopardizing your own financial security. The other big concern that I talked about, long-term care expenses. A technique or a strategy that I found helpful with clients is that if, some point early in retirement or, wherever you are in your retirement journey, if you set aside kind of a separate bucket of money and say, all right, this bucket of money is just for long-term care expenses, and you kind of just keep that by itself, then you can kind of have in the back of your mind that you can know, okay, I have money set aside for long-term care expenses. And so if that ever happens, I know that I have money set aside for that. And that can provide you with a little bit of, feel a little better about spending from your other money, knowing that you've already accounted for that, that possibility. So with these in mind, I would just say that, when you die, you can't take your money with you. So hopefully these insights are helpful, can help you in feeling a little more confident about creating a spending plan and then actually spending what you have saved, so that you don't get later on in life with as many regrets. So now that you know these powerful insights from wealthy 80-year-olds looking back on their retirement journeys, you can apply their hard-earned wisdom to your own planning. And if you want me to help you apply these insights to your own retirement strategy, click the link in the description and book a complimentary call where I'll analyze your retirement plan and give you personalized advice moving forward. And I'll see you in the next one.